partially in Cappadocia, today in Turkey. You you found some places where they lived in caves and so on. And of course, when this is your background, if you are prosecuted, of course, the individuum or the individual, the person falls out of the out, and then the herd, like Nietzsche said it, the group becomes the center of all attention. This is normal. This is what you see in the animal kingdom as well. If you want to survive, you don't survive on your own, but with a group, you have to be always aware. If you are prosecuted from a state in the Roman Empire, then your survival is of course only the group, and not the individual, or not the single person. And this may have led to this herd morale, what Nietzsche talks about. This is when the individual gets lost in the masses. But then this changes. I think this is something you can indeed see and prove. This some sort of slave morale of Christianity changes in the history, and it changes when Christianity becomes national religion in the Roman Empire. Of course, when Christians were prosecuted, then they would be some sort, not only humble, but would some be more complacent with other religions. They would rather advocate for peaceful together, and this then changes with when Christians come into power. This is when they start persecuting other religions. This is the age where you can say Christianity starts with some sort of a purity, some sort of soul cleansing, being religious, pious, and then getting rid of this pagan rituals, which was part in the Roman Empire, which were very important in the Roman Empire. And before the Christians came into power, the Roman state was more or less, I mean, this is never clean, but it was more or less secularized. There were many cults, there were many religions, and the state itself was rather outside religion. And the reason why Christians were actually persecuted was that they would not accept those Roman gods, or those polytheistic gods next to their own religion. The reason why they were persecuted was because Christianity was actually not willing to make compromises in accepting other religions next to them. This was actually the reason why they were then persecuted. And then when they took over of the slave morality, then became some sort of a morality of purity, of cleansing, being decent, pious, and so on. And in all these stages, I mean, I have only talking about antiquity and the rise of Christianity. In all these episodes of history, a man had always be careful on how to conduct himself. Men were the preserver of family and the defender of family. And from the antiquity to the New Ages, this was crucial. This was crucial because of militarism, and you could say, if you see this from this background, that militarism and the military played a crucial part on how men behave in public, as well as how they conduct themselves. Within the Roman Empire, as well as in ancient Greece, the military was very influential. In ancient Greece, the military defended the Greeks from Persian conquest, upheld Greek civilization. They had a high reputation, and in the Roman Empire, the military extended the empire. The Roman legions carried the Roman eagle of the empire throughout the entire Mediterranean. And then, when the Roman Empire declined, the military could keep this empire together. This is as well as known those era in the Roman history where soldiers became emperors. This was so the military was pretty much the only protection against hordes of barbarians like Goths and Huns. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, again the military as well as swordsmanship like knights became very important in Europe, and they were some sort of a bastion against those plundering hordes, because after the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe some sort of fall into its dark ages. There were constant wars, and this would lead to the and of course there were religious wars, Reformation, and so on, and up to the Peace of Westphalia. Europe, or the history of Europe, is a very bloody one. In if you compare this to other parts of the world, Europe is a bloody continent. In Europe, many wars were fought about religion, about whatever reason, but nevertheless, the history of man of human history is first of all always written by man. This is something we have to admit, but as well as it is a history of war, as well as a history of the military and moral principles for man, how man should behave. This male gender derives their principles and guidelines from the military and the military life. I mean, you could say the first principle was to live a simplistic life. Of course, as a soldier, you live very simple. You do not live in wealth or so ever. And of course, this is another very important issue. Is you are always this threat in military. The big issue is the psychological effect is that there is a constant threat of defeat or being some sort of overrun by the enemy. This has led to some sort of an absolutistic thinking. Either I win or I lose. These are indeed military prowesses or military thinking. And another thing is being obedient to superiors, because this is the only way an army works. So that there are superiors, or that you have to follow your superiors. And as well as there is a very good example in the Roman Empire, especially when those soldiers, ordinary soldiers, became emperors. One big issue was that in the Roman Empire there were constant civil wars, and in these civil wars always emperors would be killed. So a lot of emperors were actually killed either by their own men or by Praetorian Guard, and in order to protect themselves against assassination, this is what the Romans then started, or the Roman emperors started. They some sort of cloaked themselves in in a way of divinity, that the emperor would be beyond normal humans, that the emperor would be special, and in order to stop people assassinating them. Later, this was extended to the aristocracy, because the aristocracy was nothing as the military class within the empire, and in the late Roman Empire, the military kept the empire together, and then the aristocracy became an institution in the Middle Ages and then into the New Ages, and this institution had always some sort of a cloud of divinity, and in order, of course, to protect themselves against internal foes as well as external foes, especially against assassinations. And another militaristic virtue, as well as some sort of a male gender, was defending your home and country. This goes back to the Roman Empire, to the beginning, to Greeks and whatsoever, and then in extension, taking care of your family, being the sole provider of your family, because you keep them safe, you keep the enemy at bay, you can ward off any attacks of the enemy. This means you, as the man, protect your family as well as you have to protect your family, and you some sort of mirror then in extent this role model as the great protector of your family. You are their great protector, and then later in Christianity, that the man preserves the religion and the tradition. This has to do with the military as well, because if new hordes like the Goths or Huns come in, they have their own religion, they have their own traditions, and if they win, then everything is lost. And as a man, you are obliged to, or this is being laid on your shoulders, that you have to protect your life, and so on. So you could see that in the beginning, and this is up to the eve of the revolutions in the 18th century, this is where man, or male gender, is very militarized. It follows militaristic principles, how men should conduct themselves, how they should act, and this is of course to go on adventure, because military life had of course adventure in it, but mostly to be the sole insurance for the survival of the family, and this was very important, and this was the self view of man up to the eve of the revolutions in the 18th century. And then with those liberal revolutions, things change. I said it in the past. I think that the French Revolution was more important than the American, because one thing the French Revolution did, they got rid of this feudal system in France, whereas in America, because it was far away from Great Britain, a feudal system had, like in Europe, a feudal system like in Europe had not developed. So the French Revolution was, in my sense, very important, and of course because of its proximity to Europe. However, with the French Revolution, some sort of a new moral archetype emerges. This is through the business class or bourgeoisie, and these are manufactory owners and who built